Hello and welcome to Breaking Bread with Rivaaj Maharaj, where nothing is off the table. For today's episode, I wanted to talk on the breaking news regarding Volodymyr Zelensky's comments and remarks he's made against Donald Trump. So without further ado, let's get into it. After the last round of talks that have been held between the Russians and the Ukrainians and mediated by the Americans, Volodymyr Zelensky has come out and made some bold and concerning remarks about Donald Trump. Now, the nature of these remarks don't bode well for Zelensky. They don't put him in a place that endears him to Donald Trump, but rather pushes him away. And as we all know, the Ukrainians are continuously begging for aid. The United States, being one of their benefactors, has been, under the Biden administration, supplying them with an innumerable amount of aid, military aid, as well as cash. A lot of those funds have been misappropriated and stolen by people within Zelensky's close entourage. And now for him to speak this way about Donald Trump indicates to me that Zelensky is frustrated, he is fed up, he understands that the writing is on the wall. The Americans are tightening the screws and goading him into a discussion with the Russians and a negotiated settlement that ends the war immediately, or sooner rather than later. He has realized that his European backers are in no position to take on the Americans, neither are they in a position to convince the Americans to reverse their plan to help Zelensky. So I think for him the writing is on the wall, and the frustration building up and all these comments is, it goes to show that you have this man, Zelensky, now coming undone. He's unable to cope with what is happening and he's starting to make all these rash comments. So let's have a look at the article to see what it is exactly that he has on his mind. The article in The Independent says, Ukraine-Russia war latest, difficult peace talks end in under 2 hours after Zelensky slams unfair Trump. Zelensky says he hopes Trump's demands on Kiev are his tactics, not a decision. So peace talks between Russia, Ukraine and the United States ended abruptly after 2 hours on Wednesday following a very tense first session yesterday. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said the latest talks had been difficult, but relayed that both sides had agreed to continue talks in future. He said Kiev and Moscow still have different positions for now after 3 rounds of mediated talks. Rustem Umerov, the head of Kiev's delegation in Geneva, emerged from the discussions confident that talks had been substantive and that there had been progress, saying that the Ukrainian goal remained a just and sustainable peace. So, the Ukrainians indeed have come a long way. At the beginning, Zelensky refused to meet with the Russians. They then met in Istanbul. Boris Johnson scuttled that deal. The war prolonged, many Ukrainians and Russians died, and the populations on both sides, both Russia and Ukraine, were the civilian population, were the ones that faced the full brunt of this war, and they're the ones suffering. Between Zelensky's government, the amount of funds that have been stolen and tucked away, it's insane, and that's all European and American taxpayers' money that has been misappropriated. So he should be held accountable for that alone, notwithstanding everything else that he's gone and done in this war. But nevertheless, the Ukrainians have come a long way by agreeing to meet with the Russians. Again, Zelensky is in a tight spot. He is unable to cede any land to the Russians. But the truth of the matter is, the Russians are going to not deviate from their demands because they're making gains, incremental gains on the battlefield. They now account for 20% of Ukrainian territory, and whether that takes 4 years or 5 years to have got there, it's immaterial. They have 20% of Ukrainian territory. So another 4 years or 5 years of this war, they'd probably have 40%. or more. Ukraine is being boxed in by the Russians. If I was Zelensky, I would give Putin the land that he's unwilling to negotiate on. It's Russians, it's made up of primarily Russian-speaking ethnic people, and they, under the referendum held by the Russians, wanted to remain within the Russian Federation. So even if Zelensky refuses to give up that land, don't forget Zelensky tried to bomb those people into submission. Don't forget Poroshenko made the statement about Ukrainian children going to school while Russian children will be cowering under their beds or in bunkers or something to that effect. So there's a history there. Why Zelensky would want to rule over these people, I don't know. Perhaps it's the fertile land and all the minerals that are there. The bottom line is that the Russians and Americans are going to see the end of this war, and once it's completed, they will be doing business together involving this Ukrainian territory. The Europeans are upset because they've been cut out of the deal because of their unwillingness to want to sit down with the Russians. So they've shot themselves in the foot, and Zelensky, following these morons, has gone down a different path. Now, I think he even made it illegal he passed a law where negotiations with the Russians were not to take place. And the Russians continuously point out that his term as president has expired. His unwillingness to want to hold elections means that he's now a dictator holding on to power. So it doesn't look well for him. The article continues, humanitarian issues including the exchange of prisoners of war and the release of civilians were in focus on Wednesday following 6 hours of discussion and without US mediation yesterday. Zelensky had approached the third round of talks with a rare rebuke of Donald Trump, who he accused of exerting undue pressure on Kiev to make concessions. The Ukrainian told Axios that it was not fair that Trump kept publicly calling on Ukraine, not Russia, to yield, with Moscow's unwavering demand for the Donbass still obstructing progress. Zelensky, you cannot be that much of an idiot. The reason Russia is not being placed under this pressure is because they hold the cards. You are the underdog in this fight. You are the person under the Russian boot at present. You can fight for the next 10 years and the Russians are going to continuously make incremental gains. What the Americans are saying to you is that you've lost this much this far. Your continued belligerence and moronic behavior is going to result in the rest of your country being taken by the Russians. So while you have one half of a leg to stand on in a negotiation, do a deal now and walk away with some semblance of a country, rather than being pushed out of power and having nothing but a state that is governed in totality by the Russians. That is what is going to happen. You are incapable, together with all your NATO mates, of standing up against this Russian onslaught. 4 years of this war has proven that. Another 5 years, Ukraine is going to be history. That is why Donald Trump is saying Ukraine needs to make the deal, because the Russians have never budged and will never budge on what they have. And why should they? They hold all the cards. If you look at it, irrespective of who you support or who you don't support or who you think is right or who you think is wrong, the facts on the ground are that the Russians hold all the key cards in this battle. You have nothing to stand on except the Americans in your corner. And by you behaving like this, by you behaving ungrateful, you'll even lose them. And when it's open season by the Russians on the Ukrainians, your country will be gone, and the only people who are suffering are your people, the poor Ukrainians that you are forcing this upon. So that is why demands are not continuously being made on the Russians, because they haven't worked in the past. Your sanctions have depleted European economies, but the Russian economy still moves ahead. So very soon, even your European backers won't be there, because they'll be out of power in their countries. They've led their own countries down this disaster, and now their own people are suffering. So you don't need to be somebody with an incredibly high IQ to understand why the Americans are asking you to make concessions. You've got enough money out of this, mate. Go and enjoy it. Needless to say, Donald Trump is not going to take kindly to these comments. He remembers everything. If you recall the altercation between Zelensky, Trump, and J.D. Vance in the United States, in the White House, where J.D. Vance eventually brought up the point that Zelensky had been to the United States campaigning on behalf of Kamala Harris in the campaign, in the fight against Donald Trump. You hedged your bets then, they were wrong. You bet on another idiot. She didn't come in. And now you have the person that you bet against come in. You have to sit back and think. This man is not going to forgive you for that. And you still want to go out and behave this way? And these are the people that hold the cards to whether you get money, whether you get weapons or not. You really want to upset this person or this country? The American populace are getting tired. They're getting fed up. If they're throwing their allies under the bus, you, my friend, have very little hope. I want to thank you for taking your time to spend with us. Please join us on the next episode, and please remember to like, share and subscribe, as it helps us with the algorithm and it helps our channel to grow.